How do we get productivity to emerge from the inside out? So the first step is to realize that the vast majority of the automatic drive and motivation you feel on the conscious level is not coming from your conscious level of thought. So trying to motivate yourself with your thoughts is an uphill battle you'll never win. To win this game, you've got to look below the tip of the iceberg so that you can see under the surface level and start directing your strategy toward the massive generator of energy, motivation, and drive that determines 90%. To win this game, you've got to look below the tip of the iceberg, below the tip that you can see at the surface level, and start directing your strategy toward the massive generator of energy, motivation, and drive that is determined by the 90% of the iceberg that is hidden below the surface of conscious thought. Okay, to help us out with this, I'm going to ask you some weird questions about blacksmithing. All right, so for example, if I draw your attention to the sensation of pressure where your feet are resting against something, you become aware of that sensation. But the moment before I drew your attention to it, you were not aware of it. That's background contextual mental processing. It's not mysterious, subconscious voodoo. It's happening in the background of your thinking, and you can draw that thinking to your conscious awareness if your attention shifts, but 90% of the stuff you are aware of is operating outside of your conscious level of thinking. And here's what you need to understand about contextual thought. That's what I call contextual thought. For example, the sensation of pain. If you stub your toe and it's hurting, but you have to redirect your attention to something else, that pain is the contextual thought that's going on in the background. You may not be consciously aware of it, but it's impacting you. Okay, so it's the stuff under the iceberg. It's the 90% of your thinking that's happening below the level of conscious thought. So if you think about conscious thought like a flashlight, and you're opening a closet that's dark and it's full of all kinds of stuff, and you've got this flashlight that's got a beam of light, and you can shine that flashlight on one side of the wall on one object in that dark closet or another, but that flashlight, the beam of the flashlight represents your conscious awareness, your thought. There's all that stuff in the closet representing all of the things you're subconsciously aware of that exist, that are in the background of your thoughts. But it's only the stuff that you consciously are focused on, or the beam of the flashlight is focused on, that you are aware of at any given moment in time. And so all the other stuff is what we call context, and that's where most of your willpower and drive and energy is coming from. And the reason I say that, the reason I know from personal firsthand experience is because as a productivity coach for entrepreneurs, I've worked with many entrepreneurs over the years and watched the difference, watched the change that happens in people. For example, the unconscious internal narrative about what's happening in their business changes from things are going downhill to we're on the verge of success with some big project. It's amazing the energy that can be released, and it's far more energy that you have access to than what you are tapping into on a regular basis. So that's what brings me to this question. Which is more powerful, the anvil or the hammer? If we went into a blacksmith's forge, would you rather have a high-quality anvil or a high-quality hammer? You see, the anvil is a much bigger hunk of metal. It's weightier. It's immovable. Compared to the hammer, it's much more powerful. But it's just human nature that if you and I were to walk in to watch a blacksmith at work, our attention would be drawn to the flashy movements of the hammer, because it seems as if the hammer's doing all the action, right? Just like on the conscious level, it seems like your conscious thoughts are what changes things. But the truth is the anvil is the immovable force around which the metal is bent and forged into the correct shape. A hammer can be quickly switched out or tossed aside, but the anvil is the stable force that metal is bent around. So the conscious surface level of our thoughts are like the hammer. It's the tool we are most familiar with. It seems like that's where all the action is taking place. So when we are unmotivated and we feel our motivation wane, our willpower fade, our natural instinct is to start swapping out hammers, trying to come up with different thoughts that will motivate us. But instead, I want you to shape the empty space that determines the mold and shape of your creative output. We want to upgrade your anvil instead. And for that to happen, we need to look below the surface of the iceberg. We need to apply state management skills at the contextual level of automatic mental processing. Okay, so let's review. State management is the key to personal productivity. And the most important state management change happens below the surface of conscious thought. Let me just show you an example of how you can begin to work at that level of intervention. Let's take just one of the keys to the anvil strategy for state management. What I'm talking about here is oscillation. So this is just one example of the kind of thing that you do when you switch from conscious level manipulation of your energy to working at that lower level, that more powerful level. So you see, at the automatic unconscious level of mental processing, you are automatically and unconsciously conserving energy. You're doing it without even realizing you're doing it, because humans have a natural instinct to conserve energy for later use. So when you dive into your work, like a marathon of never-ending effort, one project after another, your brain begins to put on the brakes, subtly and outside of your conscious awareness. Your brain is literally pacing itself and saving up energy to handle the subconscious narrative that's running in the background that says you are on a long uphill path to climb a mountain with no rest stops and only more mountains beyond that. To get the best motivation and drive, we have to change that unconscious narrative. And the key is oscillation. Think of a fan oscillating back and forth as it changes the direction it's blowing air through the room. The fan moves from one extreme back to the other. And to achieve peak performance, you need to train your mind and body to follow a similar rhythm. This is what athletes do. At the highest level of performance and competition, athletes learn to release higher levels of energy than normal humans can. And they train themselves for this capacity by learning to drop into states of deeper, complete relaxation. They oscillate back and forth between full energy output and complete recovery. And this can be done even in just a few seconds at a micro level, between sets on a tennis court or between plays on a football field. It can also be done on a longer time scale, which is what I teach entrepreneurs to do. Here's why this method works, though. It's because it changes the unconscious automatic narrative running in the background of your thoughts to one that says, release all the stops and pour everything you've got into this next thing you're trying to focus on. Because you don't have long until the boring period of rest comes where there's nothing to do but recover energy. So what you've done is, in the background of your thinking, you've changed what's happening from conserve energy, this message that your contextual thinking is saying, conserve energy, put on the brakes. You're changing that by using oscillation, by using short little breaks and bursts of speed. You're actually going to get far more energy out of yourself and much more attention and interest on whatever you're working on, because you've told your brain at the contextual level, hey, you don't have long, use up every bit of energy you've got, because there's a short break coming where you're going to do something fun for 2 minutes, or you're going to relax and meditate for 5 minutes. And it's amazing to see the difference that just that one tiny example of working at the anvil level instead of the hammer level can shift the amount of energy you can get out of yourself. All right, so let's talk more about, besides the anvil and hammer, once you've accepted this idea and recognized that really the deeper level of contextual thought is where you want to do the work to change your energy. All right, now let's review for just a second. We're talking about going from that dragging and just barely able to get yourself to focus state to the super creative driven state. And I've told you that motivation and willpower don't run out. And I've told you that if you can discover the 90%, the source, that hidden source where 90% of your motivation and willpower comes from, that you have this unfair advantage as an entrepreneur. And I'm telling you about, there's ways that you can actually learn how to use that hidden source. So that's what we're doing. I'm just going to run through a few more examples of some of the things that you can learn to do. The power of oscillation is just one tiny little example of how you apply this anvil versus hammer way of shifting your energy by working at the contextual level. So I'm going to show you a few more, how you get from dragging to driven and creative. So these are some of the steps that I actually walk people through. I walk entrepreneurs through in small groups. And so what I'm doing is I'm meeting with entrepreneurs. So we're talking about a group of your peers, people who are already successful in business and who are coming together because they know that there's this power of influence that happens when you meet with peers and you work on this sort of stuff together. It creates a powerful effect where, again, it's happening more at the contextual level. But I'll tell you more about that if you're interested in joining this group, if you get on a call with me to talk about how it works. But let me just show you a few more of the steps if you wanted to use this concept of tapping into that 90% contextual power. So align competing desires. So what I mean by this is that you need to overcome divided desires. So you might think of them as like an internal civil war that causes you to spin your wheels. So a lot of times, without realizing it, entrepreneurs find themselves making tough decisions about which direction to go next. And unlike people who are employees who have a boss telling them like, okay, here's what we're going to do next, now just find the best way to accomplish it, entrepreneurs often find that there's multiple potential ways that you could go with your business, different ways you can align your mind share, different employees you can invest in more, sometimes different ways you can allocate your capital. And all of these decisions create sometimes competing desires, you're not 100% sure which direction to go. So another really powerful way of, at a contextual level, shifting your energy is to stop doing that and to essentially practice leadership from the inside out, where you speak to your own 6 human core needs and get them to all align around one single decision that you decide for this sprint. I don't have 100% of the information. I don't know 100% which is the direction that's going to be most profitable for my company. But for right now, I'm aligning all parts of myself around just one central drive. And this has amazing, profound impact when we do it right. And this is something we practice together in our small groups on mindset management for entrepreneurs. So the next thing is creating a path of least resistance. And this is something, again, this is a cycle we go through. So this changes from time to time in our groups. But what it means is the path of least resistance is where you activate motivation with a natural subconscious hack by getting extremely clear about the gap between where you are now and where you want to be in your personal life, in your business. And then you literally then outline the simplest path to go from where you are now to where you want to be. And something happens that's really interesting on a psychological level with this path of least resistance. What you're doing is you're actually creating a scenario where your motivation subconsciously and automatically aligns with wanting to pull you toward the higher, better version of reality. And so what you're doing, you're not fooling yourself. You're not using affirmations to say, I'm already there. I've already achieved whatever it is. Instead, you're being completely and brutally honest with yourself about, this is where I'm at. And you list it out like, this is my scenario right now. And you face it full on. And then you say, and this is where I want to be and I believe I can be. And then you create the simplest possible outline. You might think of it as like stepping stones that you show yourself. This is how I go from here to there. And of course, many of you have planning documents and strategies. Myself as a 12-week year certified trainer and a person who has worked with a number of different methods like OKRs and EFIC planner method and all of these different methods that are designed to plan out how entrepreneurs can move their business forward. Look, I know you've got those kinds of things in the back of your mind, but if you're not optimizing this so that it's operating at the contextual level, you're not using it to the full extent of its capacity. So again, what we're talking about here is moving from dragging to driven at the contextual level, making sure that path of least resistance is present and operating in the back of your mind. That's where a lot of your energy is going to come from. All right, here's the next one. Optimize the exposure effect. So this is one of the secrets of joining a group of entrepreneurs who are working together to shift each other's mindset to a higher level. We're trying to upgrade your automatic unconscious level of energy, drive, and confidence, really, because tremendous amounts of confidence are released when you have energy. Have you ever noticed that? When your energy's high, you feel more confident. It can even come down to the level of, if you've had caffeine yet in the day. That can shift whether you're feeling super confident about, hey, I can accomplish anything or not. Well, in the same way, that contextual level that we're operating on to release more energy, when we release natural energy that way, the dopamine and the drive that causes you to want to go after your goals, with that sort of mindset of invincibility, what happens is that your confidence naturally rises just like it would with an external exogenous chemical like caffeine. And oh, by the way, in this group, I'll answer all of your questions about the neurobiology of drive and motivation. And we'll get into that stuff too, but it's not really the focus of this training. So the next thing I want to tell you about, one more thing on optimizing the exposure effect. So whatever gets your attention primes your thinking. And so in this group, one of the things we're going to do is I'm going to encourage you guys to be talking about overcoming the odds and overcoming the things that hold you back and doing things like small sprints to achieve dramatic progress in short periods of time. And as you hear each other talking about these efforts, it automatically upgrades your sense of what's possible. I used to laugh at myself when I'd walk out of a high action movie where I'd come out into the parking lot and have this sense of like, oh, if a car drives at me, this automatic unconscious thought of I could jump on top of the car or I could flip it and throw it, because I've been watching, ninjas or superheroes or whatever the movie was about. And it automatically and unconsciously shifts my perception of what I'm capable of. In the same way, we can, at a practical and realistic level, impact the way you think about yourself by upgrading the peers that you spend time with, so that in a small group of people who you get to know, trust, and like, you actually start to upgrade your identity. And that's something that's powerful about the exposure effects. And then there's simple fun things too, like we'll literally swap recommendations for the latest TV shows and YouTube videos or books that have this sort of unconscious impact in the background of your thoughts, releasing energy about what's possible. So the last thing I want to share with you today to help you to upgrade your capacity for tapping into that contextual level of motivation is something called an intentional change theory. And this is from Dr. Boyatzis, one of my colleagues who is also an executive coach. And one of the things he's discovered in his research is that most people try to motivate others through compliance. And that's this process where you say, hey, are you going to work out? Yes. Okay, let's make a plan. And then the coach meets with someone and says, well, did you work out? Yes or no? And it's kind of this deflating sense of when you didn't, it's like, no, not really. And I'm not discounting the power of accountability, because accountability is powerful. It's just that it's not as powerful as working at the lower level of desire, at the contextual level that's operating below the surface, that's much more powerful. And that's what intentional change theory is about. It's about an ongoing process of becoming driven by desire rather than compliance as you upgrade your identity and your sense of what's possible. So intentional change theory is something that allows you to say to yourself, who do I want to be? And then it's this process that you practice of, well, what are the steps that I need to take towards becoming that person more and more? And that's something that we practice together in this group. I hope this training has been useful to you. Even though you weren't born with a manual that teaches you how to tweak the settings of your own mind and motivation for peak performance, some of us have been studying this for years. So if you recognize the importance of keeping your energy high and your engines running cool, even at the high velocity that entrepreneurs need to sustain, this is what I want you to do. I want you to enroll in my Peak Productivity State Management group for entrepreneurs so that you can work with me and some other entrepreneurs directly and permanently upgrade your capacity to unlock peak performance at the level of state management. My online group is designed to repeatedly walk you through these strategies that I've shared with you today, as well as several other very powerful strategies that act like levers to influence your own mind and motivation at the more powerful and consistent place where 90% of your motivation stems from. With that increased energy, the compounding effect on your productivity and speed of execution will pay you back your time and the tiny financial investment at a compound rate that will continue for the rest of your life, no matter what adventures you tackle next. If you would like to learn the strategies that work best for controlling your motivation at the level of background context, then either opt in, send me an email, or set up an appointment so that I can explain more about how these strategies work, and we'll get you started.